Today's episode is brought to you by Altek Incorporated. Altek is a leading custom injection molding and precision machining manufacturer of key parts and components for rockets and satellites. And yes, that includes small sats. Altek works with customers to develop solutions tailored to their mission needs and goals. Based in the United States, Altek's dedicated team provides design assistance and manufacturing for proprietary and confidential projects. As if Altek's custom injection molding, in-mold electronics, heat treating, painting, and testing wasn't already the whole 9 yards, Altek also provides assembly and kitting for a wide range of structural and mechanical products. Learn more at altek-inc.com. That's altek-inc.com. Hey, happy Tuesday, and welcome to Pathfinder, the leading podcast for space professionals. I'm your host, Ryan Duffy, and I'm excited to bring you another great episode. Today, we're sitting down with John Gedmark, the CEO of Astranis, a startup on a mission to connect the world through next-generation internet satellites. We'll be chatting for about an hour in our talk show style format, so sit back and get ready to be informed and entertained as we explore the top news and trends beyond Earth. So, if that sounded a bit stuffy, that entire intro was written by ChatGPT, which is like the most buzzy, viral AI product from another company based here in San Francisco. But we are not here to talk about the trending topics on tech Twitter. We're here to talk about small, cheap satellites flying 22,000 miles over our head. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't we start off by just hearing a bit more about the building that we are in. I just got a tour before this conversation, and we can include some pictures and some visuals, but it is quite a fascinating building. I feel like it's like the millennial's dream. Like there's exposed brick and high ceilings and everything. It's great.
Yeah, well, the very cool thing about this building is that it actually dates back to World War II and was a real life shipyard where they built warships for World War II. So this building cranked out submarines, it cranked out warships, and basically it was a whole operating complex where steel would come in one side of the complex and then entire ships would come out and then go right into San Francisco Bay. So it's a pretty cool place to be. It's pretty cool that we're going from ships to spaceships here in one of the most historic manufacturing locations in, I think, all of the United States.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know that history. I knew that it's obviously this building wasn't built in 2015 when Astranis got its start, but I knew it had some historical imports. So tell me a little bit more about how you've grown into this building and what's going on right now. I obviously just saw it with my own eyes, but unfortunately our listeners and viewers don't have the they didn't just get the tour. So to the extent that you can talk about what you're doing here today, for example.
Yeah, so we are now building entire batches of satellites. We have our first launch coming up very soon, just in the next few weeks. Yep. That'll be a satellite that we will launch to go up and provide broadband internet service to all of Alaska. So first time that a U.S. state has had an entire geo satellite dedicated just for that state. We finished that satellite a number of months ago, so it's been ready to ship. We've been waiting for the rocket. And now we've been often building entire batches of follow-on satellites that we will be putting up over countries all over the world. So we have now started to really ramp up and get to production scale as a company.
Yeah, that's great to see. So we're gonna ramp up the conversation pretty quickly in terms of getting into the technical nitty-gritty and market conversation, geopolitics, light conversation topics. But before we do, I want to just establish some key vocab terms. So that people following along at home don't get confused. So first off, and this is also a chance to kind of talk a little bit more about your product. What is micro geo?
Yeah, so these are very small satellite for geostationary orbit. So geostationary orbit is this special orbit.
You already got the second vocab too. So,
well, it's a question we get a lot. So geostationary orbit is a special orbit where you can put a single satellite up and park it over a country or over a part of the world and begin providing service from just that one single satellite. And it works that way because the satellite is up at a high enough altitude that it's orbiting the Earth at a rotation rate of 1 rotation per day. Mm-hmm. And the surface of the Earth also rotates at 1 rotation per day. So if you can time it right, if you can get the satellite right into exactly the right orbital position, then the satellite appears to someone on the ground to just be fixed there in Earth hanging over a country. So that's what we do. And what's different is that we're building satellites far smaller than anyone has ever built these satellites before.
Right.
And sort of the key insight that we had was that we could put a really non-trivial amount of capacity, enough to cover an entire small or medium-sized country with broadband internet, in a single satellite, and then provide that as a service to our customers, who are these countries all over the world.
Right. I'm going to try to take a stab at just kind of the key numbers for micro-geo. It's around 880 pounds.
Call it 350 to 400 kilograms.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't get the American all the American metrics. Can't get them out of my brain, despite having been writing about space for 16 months. And these have on the order of a decade lifespan.
So typically the satellites have about 8 years of fuel life, and then there will be circumstances we can stretch the useful life out to about 10 years.
Yeah. I suspect we can get into that, but normally at the end of the show, I ask guests their hottest take or most contrarian view, but I think that we can and should cover that ground now, because the central premise of Astranis is that when they go low, you go high. Low Earth orbit is low Earth. Feel free to use that one, by the way, for advertising. But
sure, yeah, but, no, I'm already stealing it right now in my head.
You're already thinking of marketing campaigns. So, Leo low Earth orbit is like the bee's knees. Like Leo's very, very hot right now, and I think there's you've already kind of pointed out some reasons why geo, the advantages of geo. But I'm curious to hear, what exactly made you think, it is a very contrarian view. A lot of the other entities operating in geo are big corporations that have been around for decades, or in most like nation states. So why geo?
Yeah, it is a great question. I mean, so when we started Astranis, everybody was racing after Leo for a variety of different applications, communications, as well as remote sensing and some other things. And I guess the reason we decided to do it is, to a certain extent, no one else was. There was just what we thought was an obvious gap in capabilities that we thought should exist and did not exist. And geo historically is where most of the money has been made in space.
Yeah.
So there, there's something there. And in fact, a lot of people really consider each of these orbital slots where a large geosatellite sits to be some of the most valuable real estate that there is in the entire solar system, because of this ability to put up a single satellite and park it over a country. There's so much value you can derive from that. So we knew there was something there, and then the question was just, if we went about things in a faster way, in a better way, where we're using the latest technology and all the things that we've learned over the last decade of how to build better, smaller satellites, could we do something really interesting in geo? And I think the answer was indisputably yes. And so, and I think the market has proven that out.
Yeah. Rewinding a bit to the pre-Astranis days, your background. You had a brief stint, right, at a kind of traditional aerospace defense contractor, realized pretty quickly that it wasn't for you. And then you were at the X Prize Foundation for a bit.
That's right.
And then I think the part of your resume that fascinated me the most is you spent a few years in DC, right? Starting on scaling the Commercial Spaceflight Federation.
That's right. Yep.
What is the Commercial Spaceflight Federation for those that aren't familiar?
Yeah, so the Commercial Spaceflight Federation is the industry association of new space companies, basically. And when we started it was just a handful of companies. So, this was actually back in 2007, 2008, when the number of players was very small. It was basically SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, a couple of other companies, a couple of spaceports. And there was enough there to be worth putting together, a real organization that could organize and go and advocate and make sure that the rules were going to be, that the right rules were going to be put in place and that the rules would be fair.
Yeah.
That's really what it's all about. So, I've been very proud to see the organization now grow significantly in size and still be today, I think, the leading organization for new space companies. So that's been great to see.
How did you like living in DC? That's got to be a change of pace from Silicon Valley.
Certainly, there's an impact you can have there if all the right stars align that is hard to have anywhere else, because if some of these policies that get enacted end up moving billions of dollars around, right? And that's something hard to achieve almost anywhere else. And then on a personal front, it's just it's a great town. It's a very young town. You have a lot of very ambitious, smart, energetic young people who want to make the world a better place. They move there. They find jobs where they can have some kind of impact, and it's a pretty cool thing to see. So yeah, there's a lot of great things about the town.
Yeah. So you did your tour of duty in DC, and then you moved back out west. And I think, as I've heard you tell it, you started kicking around ideas with Ryan, your co-founder, and y'all spent a decent amount of time kind of letting these various ideas marinate, and you settled on satellite internet and geo, and this was in 2015. I just want to make sure we have my timeline is right, because I'm going to take us along the timeline pretty quickly in a second here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there was quite a while there. I don't know, it was maybe almost a year where we kicked around a bunch of ideas.
Yeah, and another local institution, Astranis, went through Y Combinator. How did you decide to apply? And at the time, what did you think your chances of getting accepted were, right? Because especially back then, there weren't that many, the end of even hardware startups, let alone like kind of deep tech, was lower. Now it's, I think there's a lot more representation. I know you, and we'll talk about the
Yeah, for sure. So at the time, Y Combinator was undergoing some changes that it's sort of easy to forget or lose track of. Sam Altman had just become president, and he had basically put the word out that he was interested in deep tech and hard tech, and having more companies like that participate in Y Combinator. I think he had a quote or something along the lines of, we don't want some new incubator to start up and be the Y Combinator of deep tech. We want to be the Y Combinator of deep tech. Yeah. So, we better get moving on that. And I can't remember exactly how they, exactly how we heard that, but that was clear from day one.
It was like a call to arms.
Yeah, they definitely got the word out, and the impact was immediate, because not only did we join YC in the batch that we did, but also so did Relativity Space and Boom Supersonic. Yeah. So we showed up thinking we might be the only deep tech company or aerospace hardware company. We just had no idea. And then you walk in the door like that first day, the first dinner, and you see two other hard tech companies, one that's a rocket company and one that's a supersonic jet company, and you're like, okay, actually we're in the right place. So that was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah. In my preparation for this conversation, I knew that was the aerospace cohort. There were the three of you, and I've been in my head calling it the three aerospace amigos. Like going through that cohort. So now it's out to the world. But we've actually had Tim Ellis and Jordan Noon both on the podcast. So probably have to get Blake on at some point. At the end of YC, and this is basically, I've just been building up to this because there's you built a prototype, you spent those 3 months, I'm sure, not getting much sleep and eating a lot of ramen. But demo day famously, the YC program culminates in these presentations from all of the founders, and y'all had something to show the crowd, right? So can you just tell us that story really quickly? Because
yes,
I got a kick out of it when I heard it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So just taking a step back, the first thing when you walk in the door is the YC partners, and for us, again, hardware was very new for them, but they said, look, what can you accomplish in the next 3 months? We know hardware is hard. We know it takes a long time, but you need to figure out what you can accomplish in the next 3 months that will be impressive on demo day. So go and figure that out and start working on it, yesterday. So we said, well, we know as a company, we want to put something in space very quickly and just show that we can move fast. And we think that this early test satellite, they'll test out some of the key technologies we're interested in. We think we could build a first prototype in the 3 months. And they were like, oh, well, yeah, you should definitely do that. Like that sounds perfect. I think they were actually skeptical that we could pull it off. So they were like, but they were happy to let us try. So, Ryan and I basically locked ourselves in a room with a couple friends for, the 3 months, cranked out this hardware and had this prototype satellite. And so I think much to everyone's surprise, because they had just not seen this type of hardware before, we showed up to demo day with a real life satellite. So, we get on the stage and I just start talking, and there's a moment where we do sort of the reveal, and Ryan takes it out of this, he's got this pellet case, takes it out of this case and holds it up, and everyone in the audience just immediately went, ooh. And and it was so unexpected that I laughed. You can hear me if you you can find that video somewhere. I don't know if it's something you can still find, but
I hope you can
see me laugh on stage because I'm it's like startling to hear that. It's like something out of a cartoon, right? And so it's like to hear that in real life, you just don't expect it. I just started laughing, and then I had to remember where I was in my script and then jump back into it. But that was pretty cool. And then coming off the stage, the partners were just like, wow, all right, we've never seen that before happen.
Yeah. Ever. Yeah. So last question on kind of it's interesting because you are doing something so different as a startup, but you have a lot of these markers of a traditional kind of success story from Silicon Valley or San Francisco. Andreessen Horowitz led your Series A, went through IC. I don't have any other examples, but I'm gonna hit my finger like I have a third one. And on the investing side, I'm interested to know, and then we can get into the technology. We can get into the fun stuff. I think that in many ways, VCs can be, and I'm not speaking generally, but investors in a lot of ways can be pattern matching creatures. Pattern matching is a common term in that industry. And I'm sure a decent share of your cap table from here and elsewhere hadn't touched a space deal for Astranis. So, hardware is hard. Space is I don't need to tell you, but I'm still going to say it. Space is obviously very, very hard. And you're a pre-product, startup. So what was the pitch? How were you able to sell them and get the deals across the finish line when they probably hadn't formed any sort of theses or mental models around space companies?
Yeah, no, that's a very good way of putting it. And what I'll say is that, state the obvious, we got a lot of no's, a lot of people who just didn't even know where to begin and how to think about the company because they quickly realized they would have to go understand the technology, they would have to understand the market, and they hadn't thought about broadband internet as a new, very large and fast growing market in quite some time. They'd been so focused on software, and they would also have to learn about space as an industry. So that's a lot for VCs to take on. So so we had to find the people that got excited and were willing to do the work, and they did have to do a lot of work. And but the pitch was no different than than when I first described it at the beginning of this meeting, right? The pitch hasn't changed. There's a huge, almost unlimited demand for broadband internet, and we have not even scratched the surface of the service that we can provide to people all over the world. Almost by definition, the 4 billion people that do not have broadband internet are the people that we have failed to reach with fiber.
Right.
We have basically reached everyone with fiber that we are going to reach. If we could get these other people online with fiber, we would have done it by now. We've been working on that problem for 20 years.
Right.
So it's clear that we need one or multiple technology, new technologies or other approaches to go and solve that problem. And our ability to put up these, small dedicated satellites, focus capacity right where it's needed. I think there's something in that just clicks for some people, and then obviously, then there's people where it doesn't, and that's fine.
Yeah. So let's talk about the technology. I think that the big story. Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but where I was interested in starting, and maybe like a decent amount of the secret sauce is the software-defined radios. So tell us a little bit more about that, and we can go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So first, as a little bit of background, I think most people are surprised to find out that the big satellites that are put up still today by the traditional satellite manufacturers, and almost all the satellites that have been launched to do comms from GEO are all still analog. So there's no digital signal processing happening on board those satellites.
Right.
There's these big analog repeaters in the sky that you can bounce a signal off of, and that's valuable. But they're not actually doing anything in the digital domain on board the satellites. And so what we realize is, first of all, there's a lot of power in moving from analog into digital. There's just so much more you can do with a digital representation of something versus just the analog waves. And this is what we've learned across many mediums. First audio, and then video, and then the list goes on and on. So you can get so much more power out of the system. And then the other thing is flexibility. So for us, it turns out that being able to flexibly dial the exact frequencies that you're operating on board the satellite in software is key, because it means each satellite can be built identically as an identical copy of the satellite that came before. So you can build these satellites, then you can get to a point where you can really build the satellites on an assembly line in a mass production fashion. Whereas previously, all these satellites had historically been hand-built. You had to figure out how to custom build the satellite for that part of the world, and every part of the world was a little bit different. Different rules meant different.
Interesting.
A little bit different frequency bands that you were operating on, which meant different hardware that was hardwired into the satellite. And so each of these satellites was this custom-built, bespoke thing that took 4 or 5 years to build. And if you can move a lot of that hardware into software, you actually you can improve the performance quite significantly. But the real game-changing thing is being able to build all these satellites on an assembly line and have them be identical to the one that came before. Right.
So the satellites can be like reprogrammed to use different frequencies, and then you can also. I think you described it to me. It was a long time ago. It was like a year ago, but like you can steer the beams.
So being able to put down, having flexibility where we have flexibility of being able to steer where we're putting coverage, and then on top of that is flexibility of both what frequency bands each beam of the satellite is operating on, and you can get actually quite granular. So you can carve out significant chunks of frequencies. You can do a wider band signal. You can do a narrow band signal and put all that power behind a narrower band signal. And then also, and that allows us basically to move capacity. What that means to the users is being able to move capacity around between different areas. Think of it as different areas of a country.
Yeah.
You plan to put up a satellite to blanket a country in internet, and then you find out that a part of the country is going to have way higher demand than you previously had thought. Something happens where you have a huge demographic, growth of population, in this part of the country.
Right.
Now they need more internet. You can move capacity over there. And actually, that's on a very long time scale. On a shorter time scale, you can do it. We can do that instantly. So where would you want to do that? You would want to do that with in-flight Wi-Fi or maritime, tracking airplanes as they move through a coverage area, tracking ships. You just want to keep as much capacity as possible focused right on that ship. You can do that with onboard digital processing and some of the things that I was just talking about.
Yeah. So SREAM is a new acronym I made up for this conversation, and it's SWAP rules everything around me. So it's like a cocooned acronym. But SWAP is, regular listeners will know because we've had it come up in a couple of recent episodes, but size, weight, and power. And the idea is, the idea is that every ounce of weight or like cubic centimeter of space or milliwatt hour of power counts, and you're making decisions, at the expense. So you have in the form factor that you have, it's about with the solar array, you're not counting the solar array. It's like a heavy washing machine, like a heavy duty washing machine. That's compared to a traditional geo satellite is like you as y'all say, it's a double decker bus. So what sorts of engineering trade-offs, and you're able to make these much quicker as you already alluded to, and they are a fraction of the price or the cost that it costs the larger sort of traditional geo spacecraft. What are the trade-offs there?
The trade-offs of going to a smaller satellite?
No, yeah. So effective like there has to be some reason that the satellites that are double decker buses are the size of double. Or maybe,
no. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So those satellites are really designed to cover an entire continent.
Okay.
And have a huge amount of capacity. If you go back historically, some of the ones launched a few decades ago were actually now starting to match their capability with a satellite of this size. But if you look at the satellites built today, they're really designed to cover an entire continent. And so we're taking a fraction of that capacity and either focusing it on a single country or putting it down on a sort of a region that might be a fraction of a continent. So we are able to match the capability of the big satellites by putting up a handful of our satellites in its place. And then the magic is that we don't have to put them all up at the same time. We could phase them where you're just putting up the capacity as you need it. So you put up a first satellite, if that's all the capacity the customer needs initially, and then you add more satellites over time, adding more and more capacity. And you can actually keep adding satellites in a single orbital position, an orbital slot, in that way, and just keep layering more capacity.
Yeah. A side note, but one advantage of GEO, I'm sure, is that it's not getting nearly as crowded as some of like the key orbital shells in LEO. But I digress. I think.
Orbital debris is not the same problem in GEO that it is in LEO.
Right.
In LEO, there's very real concerns there as we put huge quantities of satellites up. Whereas GEO, there's orders of magnitude fewer satellites, and it's a vastly larger region of space. So that's definitely an advantage.
Right. And returning to the flexibility point, you mentioned flexibility. Another unique aspect, and I'm going to begin to transition us to go to market in the business side of this, is you're not selling these satellites, right? You're leasing, you lease them, or you lease capacity.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, we own and operate the satellites, and we sell capacity to our customers, typically on a long-term lease. So they sign on for a pretty long-term contract for a sort of a bulk purchase of a large amount of capacity, and then we may have other ways to sell the capacity on top of that. But that is a big differentiator in our business model. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think the next easy point here is to look at the two markets or geographies where you will soon be launching, Alaska and Peru, and kind of walk through how all of this that we've discussed, how that comes together in practice. Maybe Alaska. I think you know,
Sure.
people forget, they shouldn't forget, but the digital divide, you know, obviously very much extends into the U.S. and it's a problem in the rural U.S. and in the lower 48, but then obviously Alaska has tons and tons and tons of cell dead zones. So yeah, I think everyone would love to hear how it's what all of this coming together will look like in practice.
Yeah, so Alaska is this almost perfect use case for satellite. It's an absolutely huge state. People are always surprised at how large it really is when they get up there. There are people living in just some of the most remote places you can imagine. I mean, you can only get there by bush plane or by going out on these boats out to these super remote islands, it's a place where I think we will never cover it entirely with fiber, right? I mean, it's just too hard.
Yeah.
These things are too remote. So we know they need a lot of capacity, they need a lot of broadband internet. It's a perfect use case for satellite. And we actually see the demand there for multiple of our satellites, plus all of the capacity that LEO constellations can offer, plus point-to-point microwave. I mean, they really are going to need it all. So we are going to be launching this first satellite here coming up very soon, and positioning it right overhead over Alaska. So the satellite would be in an orbital position out kind of in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? I mean, it's directly in line with Alaska. Focusing all of its capacity on that one state. So it's just a single satellite dedicated just for Alaska. First time that Alaska's ever had that.
Yeah.
And our customer there has been doing this for 20, 25 years. So they know how to go out and deploy all of the ground equipment, keep everything up and operational, keep the ground equipment in service.
They have all the logistical experience.
Yeah, they have all that logistical experience. They've been a fantastic partner for us. Pacific Dataport is the team up there. And we're very excited. I mean, we're going to be providing internet that's a mix of applications to support tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. Right? We're talking about schools, hospitals, other types of enterprise applications, and also a significant amount of trunking and backhaul, right? Which is how large amounts of capacity get moved around behind the scenes.
And you also, I'll include a story, or I'll include a link to our story, but you also struck a deal with a Peruvian telecom. So maybe one day we could see you supporting connectivity on the top of Machu Picchu, as you told me.
Well, not one day. I mean, we're launching that satellite this summer. So that
is Machu Picchu's like within the.
I will have to get back to you, but I suspect. But our customer provides
one day soon.
They provide service all over the country, and that includes some of the most remote parts of the country. Right. The difference there is a lot of the people out in some of these remote areas are really mobile first. So what they are looking for is broadband internet on their cell phones. And we can provide that to them as soon as the satellite goes up and gets online. It's really only some pretty modest upgrades to the cell towers to be able to then operate at 3G or 4G speeds. Whereas today they are mostly just still stuck on 2G, if you can believe it. And the satellite is sort of the perfect way to get these very remote cell towers connected to the network, right? I mean, that's sort of the key thing. Every one of these cell towers has to be connected to the internet somehow. And it's really just a question of getting those cell towers connected with a broadband backhaul link, getting that in place. And then the users are able to actually get onto the broadband internet almost instantly on their phones. Their phones, these are iPhones and Android phones, just like we have. Maybe they're a few generations behind, but they can support 4G internet speeds out of the box. They don't have to go get new phones.
Right.
All that matters is what the cell tower is doing. So if we could fix the cell tower and the backhaul link for the cell tower to get it more capacity, they will get these broadband internet speeds almost immediately. So it's an incredible way to have a immediate impact on people.
Yeah, and to your point, like about all the fiber that is going to be laid, that has been laid, not only would it be ungodly expensive or logistically, physically impossible to lay more. So I want to ask about your tickets to space. So you have a ride share on a Falcon Heavy, and then you bought an entire Falcon 9, right? And everyone will know that that's pretty wild. That's a big undertaking, and also it's pretty badass. So walk us through both of those decisions, starting with the ride share, and then the decision, the second launch or mission, and the mission profiles of both.
Yeah, for sure. So the Falcon Heavy was just a unique opportunity. There's not actually that many commercial Falcon Heavy launches that a company like ours could get a ride on. So when that popped up, I mean, we were working with SpaceX at the time on a few different options, and we were just like, yeah, well, it was more of a hell yeah, let's jump on that immediately. And the reason why it's cool, aside from the fact that the two boosters will return and land simultaneously, which is, I think one of the most magical things that is happening today across all of technology. The reason it's cool for us is that rocket allows us to get a direct inject into geostationary orbit. So we will be delivered almost directly into the spot where we ultimately want to get to, and we'll be up and operational in that spot, starting to test out the satellite within days of launch. Yeah. And that's sort of not the norm for GEO and for a satellite of our type. So that's very cool. And that is just a unique opportunity that doesn't come along very often. So we knew we wanted to jump on that. Looking at future missions, the thing that we realized in looking at the Falcon 9 was that the economics worked for us to put even just four of our satellites on a Falcon 9. And I think previously we'd been assuming that we would want to put more on a Falcon 9 if we were going to go and get a dedicated launch that's just for us, so not doing a ride share. 8 satellites, more, 10, 12, some larger number. But we realized the economics for the projects that each of these satellites represents actually worked with just 4 satellites. And so we at the right price. And so we worked with SpaceX to make it work. And so we're very excited to have this rocket that is, going to be the Astranis launch. Yeah. And no one else. I mean, it is.
Yeah, it's pretty hype.
It is us, us being truly in control of our own destiny there. So. Right. And that kind of schedule control matters, right? The rideshare business is pretty tough from the satellite side. You have to be ready to go, and then you sort of wait for the rocket to be ready. And if the reverse happens, where the rocket's ready first, then you can be really in a jam, or you have the rocket basically launching without you. Yeah. So that is a big deal for us, and we're pretty excited about it. And actually, because we're only putting 4 of these small satellites on the rocket, we're actually underutilizing the payload capability quite a bit, and that allows us to be placed into a much more favorable transfer orbit where we can cut our orbit raise time up to GEO by months. So we're actually going to be up in GEO quite quickly compared to sort of the baseline mission with faster orbit raise using our electric propulsion system, and that also is something that we realized was sort of worth it to make this happen and bring it all together.
Yeah. So, and that basically translates into starting to generate revenue, starting to connect more people, like work with these customers more quickly.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, from the customer's perspective, the sooner you can get up and operational, the better. I mean, everybody wants their capacity, wants this extra capacity yesterday. So being able to get up that much faster is a huge deal.
Yeah. So on the note of customers, and I'm gonna break the fourth wall here and talk to the Pathfinder listeners, because it's a new year. My 2023 guarantee to you is that I'm gonna try on this podcast to be a space scoopmeister whenever I can. And so before we were recording, and hopefully we can also talk about it a little bit on this episode, but you were telling me that you recently made a pretty big hire. And so I'm hoping that you can share a little bit more who it is and what this person will be doing at the company.
We did just make a fantastic new hire. So we have a new executive joining us named Doug Apps. He comes to us from Viasat, actually, and he's joining Astranis as our Chief Commercial Officer. He was previously, he held a number of roles at Viasat. One of those was he was the general manager of their in-flight connectivity business.
Yeah.
And
I just wrote about it yesterday because of the Delta announcement.
Yeah. So that business, if you go back in time, 5 or 6 years ago, was when he took it over, it was a very young, very early business with, I think they may have just had even a single customer. They were doing some trials with JetBlue.
Yeah.
And he was able to turn that into a multi-$100 million annual revenue business.
Yeah. I'm not like a walking, I don't know numbers and figures off the top of my head, but because I wrote this yesterday, I know that their last quarterly results, the amount of aircraft that it was installed in grew like 20% year over year. So it's growing very strongly, to your point.
Yeah, it's a fantastic track record of really taking a business that's quite similar to ours and growing it incredibly quickly, turning it into a fantastic business that's providing a ton of value. So we're very excited to have him join, and I think it just speaks to all the momentum that we have been gaining in our commercial sales. Right. We've had a huge amount of success with a very small sales team and effectively zero marketing spend.
Yeah.
And now we're ready to, especially with this new facility we stood up and our ability to scale the business, we're pretty excited about blowing it out of the water.
Yeah. Can you say a bit more about commercial sales and to the extent you can share any color or context on what's in the pipeline? We talked a little bit about Alaska and Peru, and I maybe also a little bit about the kind of the end users. Are you mostly right now looking at sort of like the ISPs and the telcos? I know that you've also the contracting language is like so confusing, so I'm going to butcher it, but you won the right to compete for a United States Air Force contract. Again, I probably butchered that, but let's stick with commercial sales right for now.
Sure. So there's only so much I can say,
right?
Because we have some announcements coming up, but stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
I think what I can say is we have projects in work all over the world, and we have multiple signed commercial contracts that we have not announced yet.
Okay. I'll take it. Good enough for me. Can we talk a little bit about what the sort of end use case would look like for a government customer?
On the commercial side, right, what we see as the biggest market is what we were talking about earlier, like in a country like Peru, where you have still a significant number of the population that is not connected with broadband internet. They're in very remote areas, rural areas, and these are the 4 billion people that everybody talks about that do not have broadband internet right today. So that is a huge market. It doesn't get any big. It honestly doesn't get any bigger than 4 billion people desperately wanting and needing a thing, and so far we have failed to deliver it to them. So that is a huge deal, and we see the main way to do that is working with telcos and service providers to get these very remote cell towers connected in some of these countries and do other types of trunking and backhaul. So that's the big market that we're excited about on the commercial side. Happy to switch to talking about the U.S. government and the U.S. military. Obviously, things have changed a lot in the last year. I think we had a little bit of a wake-up call on multiple fronts. We have two adversaries that have very real space capabilities. And one of them in particular, Russia, one of the first things they did before they launched the invasion of Ukraine, so I mean just literally like
In February, you're right.
The day before
leading up,
was they launched a massive cyber attack on a large geo satellite that was providing broadband internet over Ukraine, and that attack, I think, showed that these adversaries are very serious about space being a component of any conflict.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's no longer theoretical. Mm-hmm. We know exactly what they will do because they showed that that's what they'll do on day one. So that was a pretty big wake up call, and even before that, the U.S. military, if we're going to get in, if a conflict happens and there's a hotspot somewhere where we have to take action, they need as much broadband connectivity as they can get. I mean, it's no different than anything else. But the question is, are they able to get it? And I don't know that today they're able to get all the capacity they need. And so being able to put up small satellites very quickly that have a lot of flexibility, that can provide this extra capacity right where it's needed, I think is something that they realized and basically came to us and said, hey, we're really interested in what you're working on here.
Right. One question I have on that, and this is definitely, that all the talk of proliferated LEO, one of the selling points there from a strategic or geopolitical lens is that it's a lot harder to hit a satellite in low Earth orbit, that even if you do hit it, there's it's a very, very redundant network. Whereas geo is, they're sometimes described as sitting ducks, because they're not moving as fast. They're easier to hit. That's where what would you say to that?
So one of the most well-respected generals, a 4-star general named General Hyten,
yes, had
this quote, which is he started referring to these satellites as big, fat, juicy targets. And actually his quote was, "I will no longer support the funding of any more big, fat, juicy targets." And I think that just sort of says it all, right?
Yeah.
We're right now today,
it's great,
totally dependent on a very small number of these very large geo satellites for some very important capabilities, right? Each of these capabilities may only be a handful of satellites. If you're talking about in geo, it's all about which part of the world that satellite is parked over. So,
right,
you go to a certain part of the world, we may only have one that is there that we're depending on. And so we need to make sure that those capabilities are resilient against the possibility of some form of attack.
Yeah.
And those attacks could take many forms. It doesn't have to be some kind of sci-fi space battle. Like I said, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it could be a cyber attack. It could be some other form of action. There's a lot of ways that you could asymmetrically go after a huge, monolithic, multi-billion-dollar, super important asset, right?
Yeah.
So that is a huge concern, and again, I think there was a little bit of a wake-up call that we need to be doing more on this and moving faster, and so we're trying to figure out where it can be helpful.
Yeah, and to your credit, you've been really outspoken about this. Another aspect of sort of geopolitical hard power competition that I've seen you refer to is the number of orbital launches. And so the United States launched more last year. China launched more the year before. And this is just because I have you. I'm curious what that why you think that's a very kind of important metric. Of course, it's an element of pride and bragging rights and everything, but a lot of folks would argue that up mass is also the better proxy of capability versus cadence. But I don't know, you're the expert here in terms of where you're getting dropped off, and so there could be an argument made there, I think.
Oh, sure, yeah. So the point is not. I mean, the point is not who is launching more on any given year. I think the point is that I think a lot of people didn't realize that if you look back over the past 5 years, China has been keeping pace with us far more than maybe we might have thought.
Yeah.
Right. And they're just launching a lot of stuff into space.
Yeah.
And there's no differentiation for them between commercial, civil,
absolutely,
military. It's all one sort of,
civil military fusion.
It's all just sort of blended together. And so all of those launches matter. Yeah. And they're launching a huge array of capabilities to every orbit, basically. Even cislunar, they're launching, they're now launching things to the moon. And so the amount of stuff that they're launching is far more than people thought. They're launching military space planes. Mm-hmm. They're launching constellations for broadband comms. They're launching their own GPS system. They're doing a huge amount in human spaceflight. So they have an entire space station that isn't talked about basically at all in the Western press. That has their own taikonauts going up and back.
Yeah, they did a crew rotation. There's literally we're in a new era of 2 continuously crewed space stations.
Yeah. It is. So they are very serious and clearly have massive budgets and a huge numbers of people working on this day and night to try and catch up, if not overtake the United States on some of these different capabilities. And what matters, the diversity of capabilities matters, right? Being able to do all of these different things across different, right? The United States has done a lot of launches. If you go look at the graphs, huge amount of that is for Starlink, which is an awesome capability. But that's just one capability.
Yeah.
Broadband comms is just one thing. I mean, space is a very powerful, there's a lot you can do in space, and there's a lot of power to that across a wide array of things. So we need to be keeping an eye on what are all the capabilities, GPS, remote sensing of different types.
Yeah.
Human spaceflight, I think, matters as a soft power tool. There's a huge array there that we need to be keeping track of. And I just thought that it was not getting the attention that it deserved. So
and
that was
for a lot of those capabilities, the argument then would be that the newer commercial space companies that move a lot quicker, iterate, have a culture of shipping. We could have talked for an hour about this, and I'm just bringing it up now towards the end of the conversation. But obviously at Astranis, it's clear that you move very quickly. And I think, right, like I am putting words in your mouth, but I think that's what you're getting at, right? Is that like where there are capabilities and where we're trailing, like
we have something that China does not have, right? We have commercial space with brand new cutting edge technologies being funded by the private sector, and those getting turned into real products and being shipped and launched into space in a very rapid fashion, right? Mm-hmm. That is not something that is just not something that China has. So I think we should be very proud of that, and then we should figure out how we can help that and nurture it however we can as a country. I mean, that's just an important thing to do.
Yeah.
Because I do not think that we will be competitive, given how fast they're moving, if we only are dependent on the old way of doing space,
right?
Which is huge programs, giant multi-billion-dollar programs that just go out to a handful of these, the traditional prime contractors. Yeah. That is not going to keep us competitive in space. Mm-hmm. That is a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two more questions. One is, this topic is, I think, one of the defining, not geopolitics, obviously, is one of the defining storylines of space and will always be. But I'm referring to the concept of connectivity, broadband from space. There are a lot of companies, space companies, but also household names, like Apple and T-Mobile, and making inroads here, making a play in some way, shape, or form. It's obviously not. There are different sort of end use cases for all this broadband. So to that end, I'm curious to hear from you who you think your competition is.
Well, that is an interesting question. As far as we are concerned, the demand for broadband internet is effectively unlimited.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what we have been told, my co-founder and I, going back to the earliest days of Astranis, is that if you're in a market that is not only large, but growing very rapidly, then you really just do not worry about competition. You just don't spend a lot of time thinking about that. Because the bigger problem you will have is how do you serve the customers that you have, not how to, and their growing needs over time, and not spend too much time worrying about competition.
Yeah. And then the last question, and then we'll go to rapid fire. There are, that we could have done an entire episode about being a space startup founders, and there are a lot of founders that listen to this. So I want to ask on their behalf, what you think the fundraising, like the funding outlook in 2023 will look like, just given macro conditions and that sort of thing. Because you kind of are on the other side of that to some extent.
Yeah, for sure. So my understanding is that at earlier stages, companies are still able to raise money, I think, as they were before, maybe with valuations, adjusted a bit. At growth stage, for a lot of types of companies, it is it's a very different situation.
Right.
But I think within that, there are exceptions, and what we have seen is that aerospace and defense is an exception.
Yeah, totally.
And if you look at the major aerospace and defense companies that are publicly traded, they are actually up 20% on the year.
Yeah, we've commented on this and analyzed it a little bit as well. It's definitely more resilient and almost in a way kind of counter cyclical. So that's encouraging. I mean, that's encouraging for anyone who's listening to this and either thinking about or needing to go back out to the capital markets.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess what I would say is, what matters is the value you're providing and the problem you're solving, right? So space is just one platform from which to solve some of these problems. But broadband internet, again, we have not seen demand dip at all.
Yeah.
With our customer base, and it's a total market that is effectively unlimited. And then on the defense side, I mean, companies should probably put some real thought into where they could be helpful to the United States, because that is where a lot of the resiliency of the sector comes from. Yeah. Right? Is that space is such an important tool for U.S. leadership. I think, as we said, sort of soft power and hard power. Yeah. That it's a big deal and something that will always be there.
Yeah. So you've been a great sport, and before I let you go, I do want to just ask some some rapid fire questions, and they're new ones for 2023. And to that end, the first one is, do you have any 2023 New Year's resolutions? And if so, what are they, or what is it? It's probably singular.
That's a good question. Well, I was going to say I don't believe in New Year's resolutions, but coincidentally, I did decide to very recently to get into better shape. So, call it what you will. But last year was a pretty brutal year for me in terms of travel. Yeah. Coming back, being able to travel again after COVID, and with all the customer demand we've seen all over the world, it just made sense to get on an airplane. Yeah. So many times that I'm looking forward to getting back.
You and me both. It's not an official resolution, but if I did have an official resolution, it would be that. So we can hold each other accountable. Second question: would you go to space? Would you go to the moon? And would you go to Mars? Yes or no?
Yes, all three, of course.
On the last one, if you were going to Mars, you could only take one thing with you. What would you take?
I mean, my first thought was my family, but I don't know that they'd be willing to go. So I don't know if that gets to count.
that will be a question for some guests. But we can go with family. I'm going to cycle between objects and people. My second to last rapid fire question. I know that you are a voracious sci-fi reader. What's one book that you would recommend to the audience that they probably haven't heard of?
Probably underestimate this. So I'll say one of my favorites, which is Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Bench. And it's like a classic sci-fi opera. Awesome. It's just a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. I'm not telling you you're going to have some earth-shattering realizations reading that book. It's just a lot of fun.
Okay. And we're at the max Q point of the interview. I think this is the hardest question I'm going to ask you. I would like you to just tell me one fun fact on Command.
I have a cameo in an Academy Award-winning film.
Okay. Can you say which or?
The film is...
Or should we leave it to the audience?
Yeah, maybe we'll leave it to the audience to figure it out.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well, I like that better.
Well, that also hits on another question I didn't ask, which is if you weren't building geo satellites, what would you be doing? So I guess we know now that it would be acting. But John, thank you so much. This has been great.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Great to be here.